necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today, myself, your nerdy tutor George, and with me here today, Junior Super Nerd, my mom.
I'm getting there.
Yes,
I've played Animal Crossing twice already today.
I got back today. I was able to find I found a kitchen unit. It's 130,000 bells, but I found a kitchen unit.
Ah,
Those are not very common.
wow.
And I found a lookbook with all the actual items in the game.
Oh, now that's actually we're not here to talk about Animal Crossing.
Well, a little. It comes up in one part.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean,
I sent you a sign.
I got the sign. Actually, if you buy the custom decor set, I actually have a cool little sign that I'll show you in Animal Crossing.
I bought the custom set.
Okay, then I will show you how to get a cool custom design that you can get for your place in particular, because you'll like it.
I customized my bed.
So,
and I'm collecting bells, and I'm giving all my animals door wreaths.
that's okay. They'll like you for that. I've actually my ninja dressed rabbit that's called Snake is actually moving out today.
Why?
He wants to go visit new pastures, and I'm okay with him moving on.
Oh, okay.
I've enjoyed him for the last month and a half or so.
I didn't know they could move out.
They can't. They'll let you know ahead of time. They're like, hey, I was thinking of maybe relocating. Maybe like would you maybe see the world or something? Are you okay with me leaving? And they'll let you know. You can also, if you go to Isabel, you can tell them that you don't like certain neighbors, and that could actually push the progress of getting them to leave.
Why would
sooner.
you not like? I've got a ram. I've got a funky looking bear. I've got a fawn. She's real cute.
Yeah. So
I have an aardvark.
there's some creatures that you fall in love with sometimes, and some that you don't. Like a lot of people really don't like Kurlos. Apparently, I don't know why. I love him because he waters my flowers.
Oh, I've seen. I plant flowers every. We're talking about Animal Crossing. I plant flowers everywhere.
Oh, well, my thing is entirely littered with flowers. I'll show you later on today.
I have hydrangeas. I have everything.
Because I want to give you.
The windflowers are beautiful.
Oh yeah, I finally got some pink. I got some black roses and pink roses that finally grew in. I'm very excited about that. I'm working on a couple other flowers. And
I got some cross-pollinated tulips.
my thing is littered with tulips right now.
Yeah.
Tulips and red roses and white roses. So, but Animal Crossing is a good little segue here, because that's kind of one of the things that we've had a lot of time to do with, and we're recording this in early May. We've been early June, excuse me. See how much time has passed.
Yeah.
And
we're week 12, I think, of lockdown, or
yeah,
week 11.
we're 11 or 12, depending on when you got locked down at.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been in this unusual state where everybody's got a lot more time at home. Can't go out because
Not liking this. If this is retirement's gonna suck.
Oh, I was going to tell you that retirement is probably going to suck for you because you want to get out.
I want to get out.
But you got the hills that you can bike on where you're going to go.
And I will say, so I've been riding for AIDS Life Cycle. I've been riding every day during the pandemic, and I'm up to I think I crossed 800 miles today.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so we were talking last time when we were talking Animal Crossing, and one of the things you had a question about was what's kind of changed. And I've talked a little bit about it off the podcast, but I figured, well, let's talk about it because it seems kind of like an interesting thing to talk about as far as what's kind of changed in the world for nerdy things.
I can give you one.
Okay.
I have completely non-technical people in my office, and the one thing, they've been forced to embrace Zoom.
Oh, I find new ways whenever I have to do a Zoom call to just torture people. Well, not torture, but I mean have fun with it.
I have my 83-year-old boss coming on Zoom meetings. I have to send him a fresh invite right before the meeting because he can't get to his calendar. He hasn't figured that out yet. But no, I have really non-technical people who are embracing that as a technology, and construction meetings where we would be looking at plans and discussing alternatives and things we're doing online through media like Zoom, Zoom and several others. And so it is, I will say, working from home is forcing technologically astute people to embrace technology, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, and on a certain level, I mean, we should really be thankful because if this were sometime in like the 80s or 90s, the internet would not have been so prevalent, and who knows what kind of work you could do from home. I think working from home was not really an option back in those days.
Started being an option around 2000.
Yeah, I mean, you had the internet and you had certain elements of the internet that could be used, but not at the speed in which you could have a video conference call, much less transfer files easily.
Yeah, no, I used to have to VPN into a server that was at our location, and now and that sometimes was difficult, and now I VPN into a server that's on the cloud.
Everything's on the clouds.
Everything's on the cloud. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I find it interesting. Have you figured out virtual backgrounds yet?
I have figured out virtual backgrounds because it was Wanda's birthday, and so for that call, I had balloons.
So the last time I had a virtual meeting was actually today, and I actually had the Tiger King behind me the entire time, just waiting for somebody to make a comment about it. And eventually, my boss eventually made a comment about it, and we all were able to kind of giggle and laugh about it because it got us off a serious talk and conversation we were having.
Yeah.
So, where I think everyone was a little uncomfortable by it. The conversation, not the picture.
Right.
Because it was just goofy.
You need a little levity.
Oh,
There is actually a service in which you can hire a llama or goat to appear on your call. It's like $125, but which seems to be a little pricey, or else I'd do it. But yeah, there's a service where you can hire an animal to appear.
That better be like at least an hour-long call. Then.
That's for half an hour.
For half an hour?
For half an hour. Yeah.
Oh, I can get you a llama to appear in your background for you.
Well, no, not to appear in my background. A live animal.
To appear in your background, yeah, I can do that.
No, I can do that. No, this is a live animal is actually there. Yeah.
Oh, the logistics of that would be interesting.
Yep.
So, first thing I wanted to talk about that probably comes up the most quickly for nerds is going to be movies.
AMC made an announcement today that they may not survive this, and they are the largest movie house in America.
Yeah, and there's a number of other theaters that are in a real pickle here because again, they can't support these huge warehouse-like buildings with all this high-tech equipment without people actually being there, and especially when it comes to, especially in the last decade or so, I would say that like superhero movies and nerd movies in particular have been huge box office things that have just probably offered a lot of money.
Well, and the other thing that AMC pointed out is that they cited two things. They cited, aside from social distancing is about impossible in a movie theater, and they don't know how they could clean a seat that you just sat in for 2 hours adequately so the next person feels comfortable. But the two other things they cited was, first of all, that the Trolls movie went direct to TV, direct to
video.
Yeah, direct to streaming.
Streaming.
How that? Okay.
Yeah, streaming home video.
Yeah, so the Troll movie went direct to streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is that all these blockbusters or expected blockbusters pushed their schedules out to the fall.
Some have pushed them out to the fall. Some have pushed them out even to next year in some cases.
So AMC said, even if we could open, we have nothing to play.
Nothing right now, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the major concern was that, again, I was reading something from the Wall Street Journal here today. It says that box office sales receipts are estimated to fall to be under $5 billion for the entire year. It's going to be $500 billion less.
Yeah.
But you also have a lot of major movie studios that are not only they're not releasing a lot of stuff here. So as an example, Black Widow was supposed to release here in June. We were supposed to have Wonder Woman in May. All those have been pushed back to much future dates. In some cases, they're aiming for July and August, but it wouldn't surprise me. I know Black Widow, I think, is aiming now for November because it pushed the Eternals back. Which was another Marvel Marvel movie that was coming out. Wonder Woman, I think, is supposed to be coming out in August now, if I did my notes correctly. But there's all these movies that are either getting pushed out that were supposed to get released here, or in some cases here, Onward, as an example, was supposed to be the new Pixar movie. I think it had a week in theaters and then went directly on to Disney Plus. The same thing with Frozen 2. Frozen 2 wasn't supposed to come out on home video streaming or other services until sometime in the summer, but then it came out almost the minute everyone started getting locked down here in March.
I bought it.
Birds of Prey was another one that I think didn't even go to movie theaters. It's a DC action
Right,
hero
yeah.
movie, and that went right to
Streaming.
right to streaming as well. There's another literal Disney movie called Artemis Fowl, which actually, when I read the synopsis, is kind of interesting. 12-year-old is in charge of a crime syndicate and thinks he's found sprites and spirits. It looks bizarre, and
So mobsters with fairies.
it looks bizarre, and I kind of want to watch it just because I'm always excited to see new properties and see what new stuff gets done. Like, I don't like repeats of stuff. Like, that's my big problem with a lot of the live action stuff, is that with Aladdin and The Lion King is like, I already saw the best version of this. Unless you were doing something that added more to it. Like, if I saw The Lion King from like Scar's point of view and they made Scar the hero.
Like Maleficent, I thought was marvelous.
Now again, I like Maleficent because again, it tells the story from the bad guy's perspective, and it does add more to it. Like, the fairies are
Humanizes her.
bumbling.
Yeah.
The king is actually kind of a dick, along with the queen.
Yeah.
Like, there it makes more sense because I'm seeing a new side of the story, because I already know Sleeping Beauty.
But Belle and Cinderella and all of that.
Yeah, those are movies that, like, I don't have a care. I mean, like, they're not telling the story differently in any particular way. You know, they're just retelling the story, and in a lot of cases, the animation adds a whole lot to it. Like, Will Smith was always going to be in a difficult situation for trying to reprise the genie. Try to do
He's not Robin Williams.
And again, he's not Robin Williams, and trying to fill those shoes is like asking an elephant to be a ballerina.
Yeah.
So there's also a number of other movies that have had their productions. So one of the things that happens in movies, which nobody really thinks about in a lot of cases, is that it's not the movies that are set to come out on these dates, but it's also the production for these movies that are also getting halted. If you have a movie that's supposed to revolve around beaches and sun and stuff, you're not going to film it in December, unless you want to fly all the way to tropical places, which might be really expensive. Same is true if you have a movie that's supposed to be set in the wintertime, you don't film it in the summertime unless you're in the opposite side of the hemisphere for that.
You go to Patagonia for your snow scenes.
Or you got to, or if you go to the beaches in December in Australia for your beach scenes, maybe. But there's a lot of these production stuff that just got stopped. I mean, we have movies such as, so if you remember, there was a Avatar, which was the big CG movie by director of Titanic and stuff. Yeah. They were working on a series of sequels for that, and have been for a while. But they were actually in the process of filming.
Because Avatar's a while back.
Yeah, and they actually had to stop production on that. They've suspended it. Same thing with The Batman, which was supposed to be, which again looked kind of interesting because they're taking Batman back a little bit. It also looked to be a little more fantastical. The new Jurassic World movie that they were working on has been stopped production. Another Mission Impossible 7 also got suspended right now. They were working on a new Matrix movie.
So let's think this through. Just another Matrix movie?
Well, there's three to begin with now. This will be the fourth.
Okay. Well, I like Keanu Reeves. Okay.
If he's there, I'm happy.
So what this really means is not only are they pushing stuff back, but we're going to have a valley in which there's nothing new being released for a while either.
Yeah, because again, even the movies that are in the can right now, if we get those in the fall and winter time, we will still be in a position where some of these movies, which were supposed to start filming here,
or should be in editing right now and being prepped.
I think editing, you have a little bit more leeway because you can do you can do obviously editing from home, and a lot of editing gets done in maybe a smaller closed off office.
Okay.
You may not have if you're in like a CG farm, you might have like a dozen people to a room, which is not really accommodable. But if you have them working from home, or you're providing them with workstations at home, that might be a little bit more feasible. Famously, as an example, George Lucas, when he was doing the Star Wars prequels movies, Episode 2 and Episode 3, he was in a completely different part of the world by comparison to Industrial Light and Magic, where they were doing the stuff, and he would always do it through video conference call, where the staff would be there in the ILM offices, and he would be on his ranch. I think a couple, dozens of miles away,
Yeah.
and he was able to video conference and watch all the animatics and all the CG work being done. So he doesn't have to do it. So you could do it from location. You could do it from home in that particular case. You don't have to be in an office to do it. It makes it a whole lot easier if you're in an office, though. But again, I'm thinking a lot of the people in cases in which pre-production is definitely getting halted. You've got filming itself is just not a doable thing anymore. I mean, despite the fact that it takes one or two people to act a scene, there are dozens of other people in the background, from lighting to makeup and
props,
hair,
yeah.
props, wardrobe, never mind various assistants and stuff. And then you've got people who are working on the set, the directors, people who are working on sounds, people who are working on cameras. You've got 4 or 5 different people before you can ever say go.
Yeah.
And God forbid you're in an action scene in which you have to reset everything. That could even take even longer. But yeah, there's a bunch of these movies that are just getting delayed. I mean, there's supposed to be another Home Alone movie. I don't know why.
Macaulay Culkin is a little,
I was actually kind of
old.
I was a little interested to hear they're making a Peter Pan and Wendy movie. That would be kind of interesting. And then as well, the Little Mermaid movie got pushed back. The sequel to Spider-Man: Far From Home is also getting pushed back as well now. And then a number of movies which were scheduled to be released are now going to have much later dates here.
So are we saying nerds have nothing to do for the summer?
It's not that we don't have anything to do. I mean, like, I'm catching up on my backlog of Star Trek TV shows. So I'm currently on the 2nd season of Discovery. I finished Picard, which I have opinions about.
Okay.
But
I was thinking about starting The Mandalorian.
I would recommend The Mandalorian. It's 8 episodes, and each episode's not more than maybe 35, 40 minutes each.
Okay.
It's a quick watch.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a nice and quick
Because
watch.
I just finished Game of Thrones.
And you finish it when you finish it.
Yeah.
But some of the other things that actually got canceled here are not just movies at all.
The Bachelorette.
Okay, I was okay with this season of The Bachelorette getting canceled. In all honesty, I appreciate that we got an older woman that were trying to get a more sophisticated
38 or 39 or something.
But all the rest of the bachelors are in like their mid-20s and early 30s.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be one thing if they were in their 30s and maybe 1 or 2 in their 40s, but like
There's 1 or 2 in their 40s.
Yeah.
But most of them are
much younger.
23, 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like it when the guys do it either. When the guys are like 35, 40 years old, like Ari one time was
Ari and Becca was 23. Yeah.
Yeah, like what was Ari, like in his mid 30s, almost 40?
It was 36 or 37. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
As was Nick Viall.
There has to be a rule that if you're starting high school, you can't date a person that was just born when you were starting high school. There has to be a rule about that.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Okay. So the other thing that got canceled here and getting canceled and in the process of getting canceled are conventions.
Yes.
So summertime is actually a very popular time for conventions for nerdy stuff. The big one
we missed Fanime.
We did miss Fanime. It does happen in late May. That got canceled. Anime Expo, which is probably one of the more premier anime conventions outside of SakuraCon and a couple others that are sprinkled throughout out the area. On the West Coast, at least, Anime Expo is probably the largest anime convention. That got canceled.
Penny Arcade.
Penny Arcade's PAX Expo, PAX West, which is in Seattle, got canceled. That's also during Labor Day weekend. Comic-Con got canceled, and that's in mid-July. And kind of more interesting, BlizzCon, which is a huge for Blizzard Entertainment and their games. So that's World of Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft. That got canceled. That's not even until November, even.
Oh, it got canceled that far out.
Yeah, and I wanted to really take a moment to a little inside baseball. So I've worked for hotels for many, many, many years, and there's an element where the last year I've had a chance to actually look through to have a different role in there, where I've been working with reservations and our sales department for big groups and stuff, because my hotel primarily focuses on groups.
Yeah.
And especially reading contracts, and in contracts there's a term called force majeure.
Yep.
Now, the best way to describe force majeure is that it's kind of an insurance policy built in most contracts, not all contracts, but in most contracts, it says that it's not your fault if something happens that's unplanned that doesn't let you run the event.
Acts of God.
Acts of God is another term as well, but not all the time. I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah. No, we use force majeure. It's a standard term. We use it in construction contracts and a number of. Thankfully, we don't use it in leases.
An example of like a force majeure might be that, like, let's say you're having an outdoor concert, an outdoor event, and it rains. Well, you can kind of predict the rain that will happen, so you can't use a force majeure to try to get your money back or on that at all. But if your event floods,
Your venue floods, yeah.
you weren't expecting that. It's kind of a little bit of an act of God. It's completely out of your control. That's an acceptable way of using a force majeure. There's a wrinkle to that is that the area is known for flooding, which you could have predicted. Then that may not trigger it as well. But
A lot of force majeure is tied to acts of government.
also acts of government, yeah, and that's very much true in our case here. So, as a person that was working in hotels when this literally started, and we were having convention after convention after convention basically just getting canceled on us, the big concern for a lot of these conventions and groups were the force majeure.
Yeah.
Because built into the contract is this notion that if you can't, if you can't go to it here because the government or there's an act of God that's preventing you from doing that. In our case, for some of our contracts, it was the notion that the city and the government hadn't stopped the travel here at this point. There was no travel bans, which couldn't stop people from coming, and at the time in early March, they were just suggesting not having limiting crowds to 50 people in a crowd, and
Right.
they were making suggestions and ideas to avoid that, and they weren't saying no, you can't have more than 10 people in a room. They weren't saying that yet, but we would have things canceled, and I mean, I feel bad for people who have to cancel reservations because they're not able to go to something, but the reason, it's always important to explain why the reason is that you can't go, because that might cause a trip in the contracts.
Right.
And so part of the problem here that we had was that we would have people canceling and we can't give them back their money because literally of contractual reasons.
Well, and I have the reverse side of that, and that's that I canceled a trip to Colombia with a group of 16 women, and then also canceled a trip to Uganda with your father. And in both those situations, I can't get a refund from the travel agency, but they are willing to rebook me. Now, that's because, as is traditionally true, you pay half up front and half at the end.
Yeah.
And so they're more than happy to rebook because they're going to need business. And the airlines have been very good about that too, but you don't get a refund, you just get a travel credit.
And that's what we were happening a lot of the hotel as well. In the hotel's case, we were people who had deposited there. For some things, we were saying, okay, we can't refund your money, but we can hold on to it for one calendar year, up till this time next year, and you can use that money toward a future reservation that you can make at that time. And we'll honor the deposit here. And in later cases, we were actually doing it up to the end of 2021, with the anticipation that for a lot of these people who are coming for conferences and conventions, that they're trying to push them back into later months of September, October, November, December. Well, we already have stuff on the books for that point. One of the big ones for us here in San Jose is a convention called, not a convention really, but more or less a festival called Jazz Fest.
Yeah.
It's super big in the downtown area. Our hotel gets booked solid for it, and there's always and it's always just super huge. Well, that same weekend, the people from the Tony Robbins, which was a motivational speaker who were going to come, were also just as ravenous, and they wanted to have that the same weekend.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think because you're going to have a limitation on dates. What'll be interesting is, and taking this back to our nerd topic, because I can tend to stray, is if you cancel these 1 year, will people come back the next one?
What I'd like to think is that this time in 2021, I'd like to think that there is a vaccine for the epidemic. I'd like to think that we've gotten a better control, and there will be probably some rules regarding
And there'll be
how,
some herd immunity.
there'll be some herd immunity, hopefully, and then at the same time, maybe there'll be a limit on how many people can be on aisles, and we might
Aisles
be
might go one way.
or we might be enforcing some more rules in an attempt to try to keep everyone still keep people safe. Because again, it won't be even if we even if we got this out by the beginning of 2021, it's still going to take a long time for a lot of those vaccines to get to people, to get everyone inoculated. So I don't anticipate people even being willing to go to convention like a nerd convention anytime soon.
Well, okay, so as a follow-up question to that, um, for the events that have been canceled, the weekends that they would have taken place, are they providing some online content?
So in some cases, they are. Not all of them are, obviously. So some conventions and groups that got canceled, as an example here, the NVIDIA conference that we were going to have in mid-March, opted to just do, which originally was supposed to be them showing off their new graphics card and the new technology they were going to be releasing for the upcoming year, so you could create buzz for people and sales to do that. Oddly enough, online currency, Bitcoin and stuff like that, they use a lot of graphic processors because graphics cards for the processors to help mine the Bitcoins.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, oddly enough, they buy like these super high end graphics cards, which would be great for graphics, but they're using it for something else.
Yeah, well, hey.
No,
Well,
no
I
fault
mean,
of their own.
I asked because I know. I should have been doing AIDS Life Cycle this week, which is the ride from San Francisco to L.A. And 4 times a day there is something on and it's on Twitch. Twitch.
So that there's an interesting notion, and we'll get back to Twitch a little bit later.
Okay, so Twitch actually donated whatever, and so but I can stream it a couple of different ways, and I can cast it on my TV, which we've done. And they have things like today was cribs.
Yes, I saw that, and I saw your crib.
My crib, yeah. So, but they've had live content, 3-4 times a day, to try to keep
Morale and spirits up.
Yeah.
And even though you were able to do it this year, they want to at least give you something of an experience that would be approximate, maybe.
I want to
close
allow the community to communicate.
Yeah, and so some of these conferences are doing are trying to find ways to include more stuff. As an example here, and not related immediately to conventions, Blizzard, as an example, understood that a lot of people were going to be indoors, and so what they've offered in their games, they've been having these monthly periods where they're basically right now, that until the new expansion comes out, 100% additional bonus to EXP. So you're leveling up twice as fast on characters right now. So characters are going from like 1 to 120 in half the time that it would take normally to do it. So a lot of people who have, like me, who only had maybe 3 100 level 20 characters, I admittedly now have 8. And
Okay, so the plus side.
so there are a plus side there, but they've had other events that have been trying to do that. I've had seen some of my other mobile games that have been trying to do events in the meantime to try to offer some distractions for that. I know for some of these conventions, they'll try to do online stuff. I know Anime Expo is working with some of their they would have had special guests and attendees that would have attended as special guests. They're trying to find ways to offer Q&A panels that they would have taken over there otherwise to these creators. Crunchyroll is doing something similar to that as well. Their convention is still up for running during the Labor Day weekend here in August, early September, which most likely will still get canceled. That was another reason why I don't want to talk about conventions if you're still planning on going to one. But a lot of these things, Comic-Con, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know. I'm sure they'll try to do something online if they have the option to. The question will be what they do.
So the idea is that if this was an event you would have gone to, check, and go to the homepage for that, that event and try to figure out if they're offering online content, because some of it seems like if I for the AIDS ride, anybody can get to their online content. They're sharing it with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there's more of an interest for them to share it with everybody.
So not just convention goers. So if it's something you wanted to see, you may still have an avenue to see it.
Mm-hmm. And again, the second reason I actually wanted to talk about this also kind of revolves around the force majeure element, where, and this will come up as well in in the next element I want to talk about. But there's conventions that are still set to take place coming up here, July, August, September, October, for very future. And at this point in time, and in case you're listening to this in the future, in which you know better, we don't know that we don't know if anything's going to change. I mean, for the most part, most hotels are still at a bare bones. We were lucky. I was on a conference call today where we were told we had 40 people in the house.
And this is an 800-room hotel?
This is an 800-room hotel. That's 5% of the entire hotel was occupied, if that. But a lot of these locations right now are still intending to have their convention right now. But the reason they can't cancel it is also because of the force majeure. They don't know I mean, a convention that's going to happen here in September and October doesn't really have a 100% idea of what will happen in between now and then. Now, clearly, obviously, some bigger conventions like PAX, which is in September, decided to cancel with the intention that they're pretty sure they're not going to get a handle of it. And same thing with BlizzCon as well, because they would have started selling tickets for that here in May for that.
Right.
But a lot of these things are not waiting to hold out to figure out what will happen. They're actually waiting for the government to say that you can't do it, so they can activate that clause in their contract. Because you're going to have, I mean, even though these conventions, for a lot of cases, Fanime, which is meant to be a non-profit organization, still has to charge people for tickets because they have to rent out the hotels to host the sites for their meeting rooms and
they're operating at break even.
Yeah, they're operating in a sense to break even because they also have to rent out this giant convention center. The convention center just doesn't give it away for free. You have to rent the place, and they can't even start to get their money back for that until this contract element is in place. So, and by that I wanted to kind of transition into pro wrestling.
Yes.
So the reason I brought up conventions and to talk about the force majeure is also because of pro wrestling's independent sort of outlets. These are your pro wrestling guerrillas. These are your NWA, National Wrestling Alliance shows. These are a lot of things which smaller organizations that don't have huge shows in a lot of cases, or they have small crowds of 100, maybe 2,000 at most in some cases.
Are these the peripheral venues that you might see in like Modesto and?
Yeah. Okay. Or they're like a traveling show that might come around.
Okay.
Part of the problem for a lot of these guys, so one of the things that happens here is that during WrestleMania weekend, typically, which is usually a really big deal, all these promotions have shows because everyone's super hyped about wrestling, and as much as WrestleMania is about the WWE's main event, all these other smaller organizations have wrestling shows as well because they're piggybacking off the excitement on there. Well, especially because WrestleMania would have been in mid-April. They couldn't cancel their thing. They couldn't cancel their shows until the force majeure kicked in, because the concern was that if they cancel their show before the force majeure can be enacted in the contract, then their entire organization just ends.
They're contractually obligated to pay the fees.
Yeah, so their entire wrestling organization just disappears overnight because they're paying the fees for the site with the intention of getting all these ticket sales and online revenue for that as well.
Yeah.
But if you're never going to make any of that and you cancel it before the government says you can't do it, well, now they've got to pay all this money and they're out of an entire wrestling organization.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact right now that a lot of wrestlers, because unless you're the big people like WWE, AEW, and Impact Wrestling, they're not doing shows. New Japan Pro Wrestling is not doing shows right now. And pretty much everything else is not doing any shows except those three names.
Well, and how are the shows that are being done, it should be mentioned, are being done without audiences?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
So
Oh, they're in Florida.
to start off with pro wrestling, is also to talk about Florida. So
And we're in California where we're still
we're still
I
hunkering down.
yeah, and it depends on what county you're in. The county we're in just released this week for Friday night. We can actually have go to a restaurant outside. You can't
Yes.
dine inside, and you can have gatherings of up to 25 people outside, not inside.
Yeah, I still think that's a bad idea in general, but like I'm willing to. But again, I mean at the same time, like you can't keep these people bottled up quite like this for too long. That somebody's going to bounce off the wall and shoot out somewhere out of the house like a cartoon eventually.
Oh, I think you're seeing that in all these protests.
That too. I think a lot of that's in the protest too.
Yeah.
So originally wrestling was as soon as mid March happened and stuff started going on lockdown. AEW, WWE, and Impact all basically canceled all their remaining events for the foreseeable future. So this means WWE, which they would do a Raw show, and then they would do SmackDown on Tuesdays usually. Or in our case, no, they were doing it on Fridays because it was live SmackDown still. Just with a massive tape delay if you're on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But they basically canceled all these arena shows. But what the WWE does is that they'll go on these tours for house shows and or what they call live events.
Right.
But they canceled all of these for the foreseeable future as well. And these are shows in which would be, you'd wrestle on Monday if you're on Raw, and then you would go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe have a day off on Saturday, go Sunday, back into wrestling, wrestle on Tuesday, wrestle on Wednesday, and then you would go home for 3 days. And 3 or 4 days, and then if you had a pay-per-view, you went back on Wednesday. If you didn't, then you started back on Monday, maybe. But you were doing shows in between then, wherever you were.
Yeah.
They're not doing that anymore. So that's...
They're not traveling.
They're not traveling. Well, they are and they aren't, sort of, depending on where you live.
Really? Where are they traveling to?
To Florida. So to speak of Florida here, initially, due to the virus here, like, they weren't allowing any sort of... They weren't supposed to be doing wrestling.
And then they decided that wrestling was an essential service.
Yes. But it is an interesting notion to that, and I don't want to
Okay.
throw shade on anything here.
Okay.
A pro Donald Trump for president PAC, which is run by the McMahon family, made a donation of $18.5 million to Ron DeSantis, which is the governor of Florida, to his campaign for re-election. Yeah.
The two aren't... Them being allowed to continue wrestling is not related to that donation.
That's what they'll claim. But keep in mind, the donation was made the same day that Ron DeSantis said, "Oh, wrestling is an essential service." And the reason they're saying it's an essential service is because it provides new content for humans, and it allows people to have an escapism. Never mind the fact that the only way to watch Raw is by having a cable network subscription, and if you want to watch SmackDown, you have to go onto Fox to watch
Well,
that.
I mean, and the interesting thing is you halted basketball,
Mm-hmm.
which the same basketball, baseball, hockey were all in season and they all halted, and they would have the same argument. They're providing new content.
Yep.
And with a lot less...
I ration
Contact.
I ration that if you...
I mean, because hockey players are wearing masks.
I would say the same thing for baseball as well. I mean, like...
Yeah,
You mean
low
with
contact.
with the exception of the umpire and the with the exception of the batter and the umpire, like everyone else is pretty much, more than
They're
6 feet
they're
away.
social distancing.
Very 6 feet.
Yeah, I mean, and it's outside, and a whole lot of other things that you would think contribute, except that you saw it go through basketball pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that argument was supported, but either way,
It's we
they're
still
wrestling.
we still have content. So now
But what is it like without an audience? I tried to watch some.
it's different. So I'll take it from promotion to promotion, and I'm mostly going to talk about WWE and AEW because those are the more interesting ones. So WWE eventually, obviously, again, like I said, they canceled all their main events, all their house shows, and what they did was though. So I've talked about the Performance Center, which is the training,
Right.
which is literally the training and rehab facility for the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Their main gym area has had 5 different wrestling rings, so you obviously get to practice. You have multiple people
Yeah.
practicing stuff. They moved all of those wrestling rings out and replaced it with one major ring. And initially, they had chairs and podiums and chair seating around the arena. Initially,
Do they have announcers?
they have the announcers there
Yeah.
too. Um,
I knew the answer. I just wanted to.
Actually, the first night they did it was a SmackDown taping, and Triple H, who mind you is my favorite wrestler,
Yeah.
he goes on and he admits, yeah, this is going to be weird, but we're doing everything we can to be safe. So here is a different version of SmackDown that you might expect. And then he was not supposed to originally be on commentary. The person that was supposed to be on commentary couldn't make it due to travel restrictions. And he was actually hilarious on commentary because he was just poking fun at Michael Cole the entire time, and it was like he was kind of being a kid again. And I like that version of Triple H because it's like, hey, it's this gruff, mean guy that will do a lot of damage to you, but look at him poke fun and be a little bit of a bully to
Humanistic.
yeah.
Humanize. Yeah, that's always kind of a nice thing.
So what's been interesting for wrestlers is that a lot of wrestling is based off the audience reaction. You know whether you got the audience or not, and you're trying
Yeah.
to tell. It's been interesting to watch wrestling for people with these storylines where where like, yeah, Seth Rollins right now is a bad guy, but I don't really sense that he's a bad guy. I just sense right now that he just thinks he's better than everyone else, which he is kind of. But without that audience background behind him, it seems a little odd. And they were.
Well, I mean, how does something? And my question is, how does somebody like the Undertaker play without an audience?
Well, thankfully he wasn't around, but sort of around. But you get a lot of people that, like, a lot of the stuff is, a lot of people's characters rely heavily on chance and the audience, playing into the entrance ring.
The audience, having been several times now,
Mhm.
the audience is half the show.
Oh, it absolutely is. So as an example, on March 16th, which was a Monday, which is 316, which is
Right.
Stone Cold's number,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see all sorts of stuff that says Austin 316 on it.
Right.
It is a play on the proverb.
Yes.
But they dubbed it Stone Cold Day. So he went on to Raw, and part of Big Stone Cold, especially in his last run, was this call and response from the audience. So he would say something, somebody would say something to him, and he'd be like, "What? What?" Every single time that would happen.
Yeah.
Or even when he got into the ring, he would ask, "Give me a hell yeah," and it's the dead. So you're watching it, and it's dead silence.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in there, and he does it again, and he does it again because he's trying to play to the audience. Give me a hell yeah, and then somebody from the commentary team stands up and goes, "Hell yeah!" And Stone Cold's got this confused look on his face. He's like, maybe he'll do it again. What? So he's playing with the commentary
Yeah.
in kind of a fun way, and he's just like, "Oh man, what?" Well, respond to that. I don't know what they'll respond to that. So yeah, part of the initial concern was first wrestlers had to were relearning, because when you're trained to wrestle, you're trained to play to the audience.
Yeah.
And you play to the camera secondary because you know when the camera's on you. Now a lot of the wrestlers are having to relearn to play to the camera because you have that option. But they've also been taking a few risks here and there because the way they are shooting the wrestling right now, and this goes a little bit back into flying.
Yeah.
They will shoot 1 week worth of content for multiple weeks out.
That makes sense. If you could stack it up and spend a whole day shooting
Mm-hmm.
and get 3 or 4 days worth of shows,
Yes.
that makes sense.
And
Because then you can let people go home and shelter safely.
Well, as an example here, what you can do is that a lot of wrestlers, when they go in WWE, usually if you have a feud with one, as an example, Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens had a feud. They are primarily just working with the two of them and whoever else was with with Seth Rollins. And then what you could do is that if you only need to have, if you're going to shoot all these different, segments with, Rollins and Kevin Owens, but you don't have to include too many other wrestlers in the process, you can have them film all their stuff within 1 or 2 days and then send them off,
Yeah.
send them back home. And so that's what we're doing with a lot of wrestlers in that particular case, is where they now keep in mind, because the performance center is located in Florida, a lot of wrestlers have actually just moved to Florida because of ease of access. You also
Yeah.
have good hubs like Tampa, which allows very easy access to, and Miami that allows very easy access to leave and come out of
Yep.
Florida. But a lot of wrestlers as well is that when they get started wrestling for the performance center, they move down to Florida with their entire family. They'll be there for 1 or 2 years.
While
But
they're
then,
training,
yeah,
because
and
it's their training facility.
but then it just becomes prudent to just live in Florida, because if you get injured, well, you have the WWE Performance Center, and it has a rehab center inside of it too, with
Yeah.
state of the art machines and doctors that'll help you rehab, and that's a great place to get trained and back up as well.
And it's
So it works
important.
out.
It's important to mention that the wrestlers had a choice as to whether or not they participate in this.
Yes, and it's a great example of that. Some wrestlers have chosen not to wrestle. Most prominently is Roman Reigns. Now, going into WrestleMania, Bray Wyatt, who was the guy with the weird, scary face
Right.
that was kind of
Right.
giggly, if you remember the show that we went to, he was yelling against a bald guy with his massive goatee.
Right.
So that guy was a guy named Bill Goldberg, and we all hoped that he would actually be there instead of being this video conference, which sucked.
Yeah.
Because his entrance is like nothing else.
It was enough to see the Undertaker's entrance.
Oh, so great.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was that so Bill Goldberg actually won the Universal title off of Bray Wyatt. So they had this, he had the championship with him, and the intention was to have Bill Goldberg versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. Well, about 2 weeks before the event was scheduled to take place, Roman Reigns pulled out. Now, Roman Reigns has had cancer beforehand. He had cancer when he was in NXT, and then this last year in 2018 or 2019, in 18 he had a relapse in it and didn't come back till 2019. And so initially the concern was about him and his immune system, because again, that could be very well compromised.
Yeah.
According to him, his actual concern was that his wife recently gave birth to twins, and he didn't want to have that concern of bringing that back home.
Yeah.
More recently, Sami Zayn was actually a wrestler that was in WrestleMania, who was the United States champion. He was a mid-card champion. He decided that due to the events going on right now with COVID and stuff, that he felt it was better for him not to be out and about right now, and he wanted to stay at home.
Yeah.
Well, they stripped him of the title and are now having a contest to figure out the new United States champion. But there's been a bit of this going around, and even WrestleMania was weird in and of itself. So obviously WrestleMania has basically kind of this 3 or 4 day weekend, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
The first night they have the Hall of Fame ceremony, where they induct people into the Hall of Fame. And usually these are former wrestlers or notable people in the...
Sorry. That'll be a delivery.
What, my pop? No, it's not pop. Yeah, it's GPS. Thank you.
I was talking to him the other day. He said I didn't know what that was going to be. I thought that might be a pool. I said, yeah, you and everybody else.
Actually, I got something for you coming on tomorrow, actually. So
Okay.
I'll have to give it to you next Monday.
Okay.
So typically the way WrestleMania weekend works usually is that there's the Hall of Fame ceremony. They're inducting former wrestlers and occasionally notable personalities of the wrestling industry. And they also usually introduce a celebrity as well. Snoop Dogg was introduced one time. A couple other notable celebrities have been in there occasionally. So that's one night where they're trying to honor the past. The second night is the NXT, which is its own brand now, which is kind of the developmental leagues of the WWE, although not quite anymore. They usually have a show called Takeover, and that was supposed to be the WrestleMania weekend. And that would have been on Saturday.
Uh-huh.
And then you would have had WrestleMania on Sunday. And WrestleMania for the last few years, because they have so many wrestlers and so many things going, has usually been
It's like 4 hours.
no, it's 9 to 10 hours.
Oh my gosh, I only watched 4 hours of it. Then.
Oh no, no, I only chose the good. I only chose the good stuff for you. Keep
Okay.
in mind, like, because the matches will go for over like a half hour in some cases.
Oh, it was so much fun.
And they'll start at like. And keep in mind, like the actual show itself starts at like 4 or 5. It starts at like 5 o'clock in the evening. And WrestleMania itself, like when Becky Lynch, Charlotte, and Ronda Rousey went to go on, it was almost past 1 o'clock.
That actually was my favorite match. That was so much fun.
It was a good match.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, there's usually about almost an hour and a half to 2 hours of pre-show before that they do. So there's all this other stuff that kind of happens.
Got to warm up the crowd.
Warm up the crowd, but also other little stuff.
Yeah.
Well, this case they did 2 nights of it instead. They had one. They had a night on Saturday, and they had a night on Sunday, and they divided. And because they were able to do that, they took some of the stuff that would have been on NXT, and they've pushed that to later matches down the line. They're not actually because they're not doing a takeover.
Right.
They're just going to do those matches later on. But they're able to do some more matches and get some more people in there, and so you had, admittedly, much shorter matches. And most matches were not more than 10 to 15 minutes long. And there's only like maybe a handful that were more than 20 minutes. All the men's championship matches, the Universal Championship and the WWE Championship, all lasted about 8 minutes in total if you combine them. They were not long matches. They were
See,
very
that's
short.
disappointing because those longer matches allow you to develop some character.
They're interesting storytelling.
Yeah.
The only problem is that Bill Goldberg is a wrestler that was really good. It was a popular wrestler in the late 90s. And he is not the most agile, and he was never a wrestler to have long matches. He was a guy that, oh look, he did a move. Oh look, he did another move, and then he won. Oh my goodness, nobody will ever defeat him. That's actually how he beat Brock Lesnar on a couple of different occasions. And the same thing with Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is not known for long matches at all. His matches are usually end up being very short because he's supposed to be this overwhelming dominant force that you cannot appreciate properly.
Yeah.
He's just supposed to steamroll everybody. So usually when these guys have matches, they're short matches. In the case of Bill Goldberg, they replaced him with Braun, which is this huge, 7-foot guy that's been doing a lot of cool and interesting stuff in WWE for a long time, and they finally just gave him the championship. And he's super likable too. So I mean, he's a gentle giant, but not the kind of giant you want to cross.
Okay.
And then you have Drew McIntyre, which won the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Who started out in WWE and got released from WWE at one point. Came back as a super huge buff Irish guy, and his WrestleMania moment is basically him winning a championship in an empty arena, in the empty performance center. And what's actually kind of interesting about that match was that they did that match on Tuesday. He filmed his ownership of the championship the next day.
Oh.
So because again, all these were pre-taped.
Yeah.
Now you would think that because they were pre-taped that the WWE wanted to try to do different stuff occasionally, and they did in some cases. They were trying different angles, and in some cases, some wrestlers repeated moves and they spliced it out, and spliced in the good.
I was gonna say, it would give them a chance to reshoot and re-edit.
What was actually the highlights of the entire weekend for WrestleMania was actually 2 different matches. So you had AJ Styles versus The Undertaker. And they didn't want to call it a cemetery match, they called it a boneyard match. And basically, it wasn't even a wrestling match, it was just 2 guys fighting in a cemetery. But it was filmed like a movie. And it was interesting because they had a bunch of 3 different shots, and they had different angles, and they had different lighting, and clearly they were mic'd, or they didn't have mics on them, but you could hear them talking the entire time. And again, this 20-minute movie, 2 guys just having a fight, and it was certainly interesting. The one that was even more interesting was John Cena versus Bray Wyatt. Um, Now, Bray Wyatt's this John Cena and Bray Wyatt actually go back to WrestleMania. Ooh, how far did they go back? WrestleMania 30, in which Bray Wyatt was trying to convince John Cena that he has a mean bone in him too. I'm just going to have to be that guy to let it out of you, so you can be your true self.
Yeah.
And the way the entire storyline was going was that Bray Wyatt should have won, and it allowed John Cena to go from this nice babyface to being a heel, to being a bad guy. We could have seen a new dimension to John Cena. Because Bray Wyatt lost that match at WrestleMania 30 against John Cena, he didn't really get a huge push again after that for many, many years. I mean, he's always been around and doing stuff, but he's never had the. It wasn't until 2008 in which he got when he finally got the WWE Championship. But even then, he didn't do a whole lot with that either. He lost to Randy Orton at the following WrestleMania. And it's been a guy that they haven't done a whole lot with. But now, obviously, he's got this weird gimmick to him, and he's doing gangbuster. So John Cena versus Bray Wyatt was basically going through all the greatest hits of John Cena over the last almost 20 years. And it wasn't even so much a match, so much it was just a series of small vignettes about John Cena's failures in his past. And it's since been thought that this is actually John Cena's retirement match because he hasn't posted anything. Usually he's very active on social media. He hasn't been very active since WrestleMania on social media. Or if he has, it's
Did
not
he win it?
No, he lost.
He lost.
And Bray Wyatt won. But it was shot in such a weird way that worked perfectly for Bray Wyatt's character, because Bray Wyatt's this weird Pee Wee Herman-esque monster character right now that's prone to, happy silliness and weirdness, but darker evil side that will come out and all this. So that's been really interesting from WrestleMania in that particular case. One of the few downsides of this though is that right after WrestleMania they released some odd 20 plus wrestlers. And this is kind of the baffling thing. One of the things I'm not really happy with WWE about. They released over 20 plus wrestlers. They basically furloughed and fired a majority of their road staff. Obviously, these are the people that would have been on the road and
logistics and all those things. Yeah.
Setting up the rings. You're good.
So we're going to wrap this up because food's here?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. And just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to work tonight?
No.
Okay.
Why?
Because that's probably not a shirt you could wear to work.
No, I wasn't going to wear this shirt to work.
Because right now that would be...
Yeah, it would be very taboo.
Okay.
I was not planning on... I don't have to go to work tonight. No.
Okay. Just ask.
No. I actually had to do a load of laundry here today because most of my shirts are black. And so I don't want to wear black when it's going to be 100 degrees outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want me to get the door pop? I've got more things to bring in. Oh, okay. So they released about 20 plus wrestlers, all these road agents, all these producers as well, longtime producers too, that have been with the company for a long time. As an example, they let go a referee that's been with the company for over 35 years. It was actually the head referee.
Jeez.
All in the interest of trying to save about $4 million a month in salaries.
Yeah.
But never mind the fact that they actually had over $500 million in savings at that time. And actually were saving a lot more money considering they weren't doing the road shows, and wrestlers who weren't wrestling were obviously not getting paid either.
Right.
And they could have actually kept a lot of these people on payroll, either wrestling or not wrestling, because even if you're not wrestling, you still get some residuals.
Yeah.
But they didn't, and it was actually kind of very much a bummer in that particular regard for a lot of these wrestlers. One of the wrestlers here in this case was a gentleman named Rusev, and he actually started a fund with $20,000 of his own money to give to other independent wrestlers because they couldn't get work at the time. And he was one of the guys that got let go.
Yeah.
Um, but as a counterpoint to that, we have AEW. We haven't really talked about AEW too much.
No.
So AEW is it stands for All Elite Wrestling. In New Japan Pro Wrestling, there was a group called the Bullet Club. They had a subdivision called the Elite, which was all these other. Technically, they were Caucasian guys that were not really bad guys, as most Bullet Club members are bad guys, but they were still like the outsiders. They weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And essentially, what they ended up doing was there's a gentleman by the name of Cody Rhodes. His father is well-known Dusty Rhodes, who's been all over wrestling and everything. Basically decided, as Adair said, I'm going to have a wrestling event. And I bet I could get it to sell out. And he sold it out in about 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
That worked out really well, so let's do it again. That sold out in 15 minutes. Because it was starring a lot of wrestlers that were from the Bullet Club and other New Japan Wrestling, which was super popular at the time. And then he met Tony Khan, which is the father of the man who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they basically decided to start a wrestling organization, and they called it All Elite Wrestling. And they have super big names in there. So they have like Chris Jericho, which was a super big name.
Yeah, no, I recognize that.
They have Cody, Kenny Omega. They have a lot more wrestlers that have been independent, but have since gotten super huge as far as their name recognition has gone.
Uh-huh.
So Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Hangman Adam Page, Lucha Brothers. There's just so many that are so interesting. Orange Cassidy, which is the laziest wrestler ever. He literally wrestles with his hands in his pockets.
If it works.
Oh, he's very entertaining to watch. Let's put
I
it
bet.
that way. So they've been having shows, obviously, but the second they got told that they weren't going to have an audience, they actually still kept the arena dates. And we're actually filming. They initially by April moved down to Florida like everyone else, like a lot of other wrestling promotions did. But they were actually still renting out huge arenas. They didn't have a base of operations outside of the Jacksonville Jaguar Arena.
Mm-hmm.
But they were filming in arena still.
Wow.
And the way they got around the audience was that the wrestlers were in the audience.
That's actually a cute way to do it.
And the wrestlers were jeering, and they were playing cards in the background. They weren't paying attention to it at all. Eventually, like a wrestler might spill over outside of the ring and into the crowd and break up a card game, and they'd throw the guy violently back into the ring.
That's pretty cute.
If you ask me the difference between AEW versus WWE, they're two different products for the most part. WWE is very is a much more family friendly, approachable sort of thing. AEW does kind of expect you to know a little bit more about the wrestlers a little bit, but where the real big difference is that where WWE is very scripted in that particular sense, AEW is not. Where AEW lets the wrestlers promote their own characters and their own stuff with a little bit of filtering from the top, obviously.
Yeah.
Versus WWE, all of it comes from the top and goes down to the wrestler.
Yeah.
So if Vince decides you get to look like a clown, you have to look like a clown for the next wrestling match. Well, you're going to look like a clown.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it's led to AEW having more interesting sort of stories and having some more interesting characters. One of my favorite bits, as an example here, there was a letter so there's a character named Hangman Page. Now, what you have to know about Hangman Page is that he drinks. He's well known for accepting beers from the audience and then drinking it in front of people, or drinking it in the ring even. So back in early March, he basically released a letter. It was very it's a very kind of funny letter when you take it for what's written in it. Like literally, it's got this emblem at the very top, and I'll include it on the website as well, where it lists written at the drunken behest by an AEW page boy, by the request of Hangman Adam Page, and it goes on to describe how Hangman Adam Page is not going to accept unopened beers anymore. He'll be traveling with his own beer going forward.
Oh, so he's He's sheltering in place safely.
Well, instead of taking
Yeah.
beers from the audience, he's
Yeah.
gonna bring his own. He'll be, instead of drinking beer, he's gonna be trying to drinking whiskey because of the higher alcohol content will save off the coronavirus. He's also not going to do any moves where his mouth is going to be near another person's mouth because apparently one time somebody spit at him and he sucked up the spit and spit it back at them.
Cool.
But then as a follow up, he makes some recommendations for people. The first one is to wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, especially if you've been in a public place. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth and with unwashed hands. Avoid public gatherings when possible. Buy a 6-pack of Corona beer. Honestly, they've done nothing wrong with this, and they have nothing to do with this and done nothing wrong. Apply your turn signal before you start changing lanes. Consider the benefits of a Medicare for All system in the U.S. Where so for the
Yeah.
and then the last one here is try ordering pineapple and a topping for your pizza. Honestly, I've changed my mind about it, and besides, it's badass. You should give it a try next time, and make sure you put that in there.
Yeah.
And then it says, "Stay safe." Hang Adam hand wash page.
There we go.
Yeah, so it's a funny letter when you read it to yourself.
It's tongue in cheek.
It's very tongue in cheek. It's an example of the wrestlers knowing their characters. Like as an
Yeah.
example, like characters for AEW have literally been pulling beer out of his hands as he's been producing more beer out of nowhere, seemingly.
Yeah.
But even while the virus has been making it so that these shows can't be viewed publicly, they've been introducing new wrestlers.
Wow. That's surprising.
Yeah, so like a couple
Because
wrestlers.
you laid off a bunch of wrestlers.
Yeah, but they've originally WWE had been holding back wrestlers from leaving because there was concern of AEW poaching them and making stars out of them when WWE could have done that as well. But a couple wrestlers have actually debuted in AEW while we've been on. So Matt Hardy, the Revival, which was a very popular tag team. Brody Lee, which formerly was known as Luke Harper in WWE. Some big names have kind of come across. And even during this entire lockdown as well, they've actually introduced a new championship title, a mid-card title. So AEW, as much as the sense that they are not allowed to have an audience clearly, and they're trying to do the best they can to keep their people safe, they're moving forward, because
Well,
they're only a year old.
Well, and it's interesting because you've got Florida, and Florida's, I guess Disney World's about to reopen.
Yes, actually read a thing on that where there's a couple things that they're not going to be doing in the near future for the time being. One of which is going to be parades,
Right.
and nighttime shows. And obviously, and what ends up happening for a lot of those is that people will camp out the benches and seating locations for these events hours before they ever start.
And you're standing very close, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, and so they're not going to do that. Another thing they're not going to do is they're not actually going to allow you to take pictures with the costumed characters for the time being. Obviously, because these are people that be put in these are people that can't necessarily hide their face easily.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't know who they are.
Yeah.
But apparently, they'll now be walking around more frequently in the park and just kind of chatting with guests from afar and kind of, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to do when I was in Disneyland was to anybody with Frozen gear. Like, oh my goodness, that girl, she's frozen. Yeah, I know, it's silly. Apparently, one of the other things they're not going to do is they're not going to allow. Obviously, theaters are not going to be. They're not going to open up some of the theaters. They're also not going to allow beauty makeovers either. They usually do princess makeover sort of things.
Yeah.
Bibbidi bobbidi boop.
Yep.
And again, the reason I know all this is because it was a season pass and it was my workout routine. I figure it was better than, especially at the price. If I went at least once or twice a week to walk around the park for 2 or 3 hours, I figured it was just as good as a gym.
Yeah.
But so the stuff in Disneyland they're not doing. It will be interesting, especially for at least wrestling, when everything kicks back up into gear and you can have audiences again. Like the cheers that'll happen for some of these people.
Yeah.
Assuming that the titles stay where they are, there's certain people like Braun Strowman, Drew Gulak that deserve to have these, applause for them winning these championships. They're milestones for these these individuals as well. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was actually video games.
Okay.
Because when we think about video games, we don't really think of it. We think of a very passive sort of thing. It's like, yeah, we have all this time in the world to play video
Yeah.
games now. And you're right, we've had a lot of time. Um, we've had video game sales have gone up by $1.6 billion over last year in just a short period of time.
Oh, really? Wow.
Twitch saw a 1.5 billion game hours watched, with a 50% increase from March into April.
Wow.
Nintendo announced that their sales of the Switch rose by 24% over last year.
Easy to believe because I had a hard time getting mine.
And they also sold 13.5 million copies of Animal Crossing. And then Microsoft opined that they had 130% additional gamer interactions online.
Wow.
So these are people playing games online with other people.
Yeah.
But also to mention here that game consoles are in very short supply. I did a search here today on a couple different websites. If you want a Nintendo Switch, you still got to order it online, and it'll get to Target with it a couple days later. Same thing for the Xbox. Same thing for the PlayStation 4. And again, still game stores like GameStop are not open right now. They are open for online orders, but the physical stores are not opening up anytime soon.
Yeah.
But this is actually kind of an interesting notion here because the Nintendo Switch in of itself apparently had, and Nintendo likes to do this, they'll make it in batches. They won't have a continual assembly line making it constantly, but they'll make it in batches. And for a lot of people, especially when, again, as an example, you were trying to get the Switch, there was a huge delay in production. And Switches are only now becoming more easily to get now because they finally were able to finish their production run and give them out and give them out again. But the concern right now is that we have new consoles coming out at the end of the year. So Sony's PlayStation 5 is scheduled to come out in Christmas time. So is Xbox, the new Microsoft Xbox X series, which I wish they would just figure out. They had Xbox, and then they went Xbox 360, and then they went Xbox One. I just want them to go Xbox Integer now, or like some
Xbox X.
Yeah, so that's what they're going with, the Xbox X. Which Xbox do you have? The X. Yeah, it's the Xbox. But what?
Yeah.
Right now, there's a bit of a concern.
Who's on first?
Yeah. There's a bit of concern right now for those consoles that the consoles may not be ready until the next year in 2021, because the production would be going on right now for chips and plastic parts, and obviously they're not a essential good of any sort of nature, so they're not being made in any sort of prevalence. But right now is when you would start making them, so that way you could have them ready by Christmas. And so there's a concern right now that those games, especially, and also CD in the games themselves, because you got to make the CDs for them as well and burn them. That this holiday season, as much as their new console is supposed to come out, they may not have them.
That's interesting.
There's
So
also
I have supply issues.
And same is kind of true of also development as well. That there's been a lot of games that have been put on hold for development. Now, obviously, you can do some work from home, but like a real concern, especially for these developers, is that the tools and software that they're using is very proprietary, and then obviously it doesn't leave their offices if it could ever leave their offices at any particular point, and so
you lose some control over it.
Yeah, and so taking it out of somewhere may open it up to malicious, theft at the end of the day, or selling of it.
Intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you can do some development in cubicles, which would let you kind of be 6 feet away. But that's not to say everybody gets a cubicle. Even same thing with ILM and their 3D effects software development. Again, like it's not up. You will have some people in offices or in cubicles, but you'll have probably 2 or 3 people to a cubicle in some cases.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of games as well that are just being delayed in some studios which have already shut down because of this, because they're just a lot of they own all these computers, and they have timetable releases, and if they can't meet those timetable releases, that there's a lot of games that we won't see in the future here.
Wow.
That may have been amazing games, but because of the way everything's kind of breaking down, there's delays, and these are delays that would have been very costly for just the development cycle, but also for future advertisements. And I mean, if you know that especially with the early releases or the in launch titles for the new Microsoft console and Sony console here, the
Yeah.
PlayStation and Xbox. Um, if you're ready in November to start selling, but these consoles won't come out until February or March now, like that's 4 months in which you're not selling product. Or if
Yeah.
you are, you're selling an invisible product
Yeah.
that people can buy but they can't actually use yet.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of problem, especially for online games, is that that major window to get people hooked is in that first couple weeks. If they're not hooked within that first couple weeks, they may not play that game. The new hotness might have come out.
Well, I mean, and you see that with Animal Crossing and how quickly it caught fire, specifically because it came out right as the pandemic started.
I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but did you know that somebody made a talk show in Animal Crossing?
You told me about this. That's pretty cute.
So the guy, his name is Gary Rida, was the screenplay. He's been a screenplay writer in Hollywood for a number of years. He was one of the screenplay writers for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, as well as a couple others as well. And him and his daughter and his wife all have Switches, and they started playing Animal Crossing and felt this just wave of calmness and tranquility to them. And as a result of that, they out of the blue, he just created a talk show out of it because he was doing
Yeah.
morning stuff and people were watching him play.
Yeah.
And so he made a talk show set that looks like a full-on talk show set, and it had like real celebrities like Elijah Wood and T-Pain and other people on his show.
Come to his island.
Come to his island and be on a talk show.
That's pretty cool.
How cool is that?
That is very cool.
I've linked that with our Animal Crossing episode.
Yeah.
So if you want to see that, go check it out there. But times have been kind of weird for nerdy stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
So at the end of the day, there are pluses and minuses.
I mean, there's definitely pluses in my case. I mean, I'm working on a nice backlog of the Star Trek seasons that I haven't watched yet
Yeah.
for Picard and Discovery, and I've been catching up on some anime in that particular regard as well. But I mean, like even anime, there's a number of shows that have 1 or 2 or 3 episodes out, and they've had to suspend it until they can get the animators back in so they can finish drawing the rest of it.
Yeah.
So definitely pluses and minuses, like you said, absolutely. Now's a good time to play catch up.
Yep.
But if you're expecting anything new, I mean, like, but again, I mean, as an example, Game of Thrones was basically new to you guys.
Yeah.
Even though it ended 2 years ago at this point here, like you caught up to it.
I caught up. I'm all done.
You know, so everything old is new again.
Yep. Exactly.
So, but yeah, no, it's an interesting time. I mean, we're hoping everybody's staying safe, and but it's odd.
Well, and open slowly.
Yeah, no, we'll get back to a normal. It just may not look the same way at all.
It's a new normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to put these notes on our website at the nerdtutorialpodcast.com where we have all of our episodes. And also if you just want to listen to the episode online as well, that's an option for you. We also have, we continue discussion as well on facebook.com/nerdtutorialpodcast where we post the episodes every week. You can follow along with us and comment on there. And if you have any ideas for future topics or future things that we could talk about, you can hit me up on nerd_tutorial where I do post all of our stuff on there as well as also topics that we've followed and been following and done before. So if you want to see new information, you can check out my Twitter as well for new stuff coming up about Animal Crossing or the Batman whenever production continues for that, or other DC movies or Magic the Gathering. But we hope that everyone continues to stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys again next time.
Bye.